Promised a race-winning project for 2026, scored 2 podiums in 2025, but should Carlos Sainz stick or twist with the Williams project, and where would he end up if he did leave? Williams very much feel like the talk of the town at the moment, and if Aston Martin hadn't have flunked it so much in the beginning of the season, then I think we would be speaking about them a lot more as well. Carlos Sainz is a race-winning driver who moved to Williams for a project that he was promised would take him to fighting for podiums and winning races in 2026, 2027 and beyond. And now it's looking like Williams are eyeing up future rather than current. Carlos Sainz doesn't have that much time on his hands. Sainz turns 32 in September and is one of the older drivers on the grid, even though he doesn't like to say that. Sainz will be very, very unhappy with the position that he finds himself in and the team found themselves in, despite actually being in a higher position in comparison to the 2025 summer break to 2026. The big difference is this year, Alex Albon isn't sat up in 8th. So the question is Carlos Sainz willing to wait? And where else could he go? Let's talk about some of the realistic options. I'm talking the options that we're likely to see for Carlos Sainz to go to. Likely, he's not going to go to Cadillac. That feels like too much of a big project for him to go and step into. He wants something that is going to be able to fight for podiums. Ideally, he'd love to take a step back into one of those big 4 teams. And I'm sure if the likes of Max Verstappen somehow open up a way for him to get back into one of the big 4 teams, I'm sure he will be putting his name in the hat to be like, look, I'm available for 2027. But as Thomas has said on this channel previously as well, Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso seem like they hold the key to the silly season. Starting off then with Fernando Alonso, if he chooses to retire, that obviously vacates a spot at Aston Martin. Now, it does feel like a little bit of a gamble at the moment. The updates and the progress that they made in Hungary was massive and very much a great sign of things to come in 2027 if they can keep the progress at that rate. And you would think if Aston Martin were to look elsewhere, you would think that Carlos Sainz would be one of the favourites to get that seat. As a driver who is somewhat typical to the way that Aston Martin have liked to set up their teams alongside Lance Stroll. He's had Sebastian Vettel, he's had Fernando Alonso. These are race winners, experienced drivers. Alright, those 2 are world champions, but Carlos Sainz kind of fits into that category of an experienced race winner to partner Lance Stroll. And they're definitely a team who are looking to progress in 2027. They're a team that want to be back at the front, they want to be fighting, and they want to get themselves to championships. And having Adrian Newey there is a big sign of intent of what they want to do for 2027. Another option that could be on the table for 2027 is Alpine. Now, Alpine might be one of the best of the rest at the moment of the teams that Carlos Sainz could go to, assuming that he wouldn't want to go back to Racing Bulls, the team that he started out at when they were back at Toro Rosso at least. But Alpine seem pretty locked in at the moment as well. They've got Pierre Gasly and Franco Colapinto, 2 drivers who are driving particularly well this season. Franco Colapinto, you would imagine, would be the driver. If either of them are going to go, it would be Franco Colapinto. Don't get me wrong, Flavio is never too far away from making a brutal decision, and if someone like Carlos Sainz came available, I don't doubt that he would make that move and that he would go for it if he showed availability and intention. And I also don't think as well that that would put Franco Colapinto out of a seat. I think if that were to happen, Williams would get first dibs. But that seems at the moment like the best way for Carlos Sainz to get straight back into the midfield. A team that have already got a podium in 2026. They're regularly fighting for points. The big difference that I see with Alpine at the moment, of course, they're looking to try and get themselves back to the front. Every single team is. But whether Carlos Sainz sees that there's such a vision there that he would want to jump projects from Williams, where he knows that they've got this big vision, this big project to go and move further forward, whether he sees that as a viable option to jump to another project that maybe isn't as set out as the Aston Martin project. I think the biggest swaying factor with the Aston Martin project is, of course, Adrian Newey, a man who knows how to make race-winning cars. The other team to compete all 3 of the A's from the grid is Audi. Now, Audi is a team that Carlos Sainz, we believe, at least had conversations with. And obviously, as we now know, he chose Williams. So something either sold him on Williams, they didn't quite sell him on Audi, but now Has that changed? Has that position changed? Have Audi got themselves to a position where they could offer Carlos Sainz something that he really wants? Now, the big difficulty again is that Nico, Hulkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto have performed well this season, and Audi seem very, very happy with their driver lineup so far. Would it be for 2027 or would it be for 2028? That might be more where we're looking. But if Audi start to hit the front in 2027 and start to push the top of that midfield, then maybe Audi themselves would be looking for other junior drivers or a different, more senior driver to partner Gabriel Bortoleto if they're starting to get themselves into podium positions or even challenging race wins further down the line. Obviously, we know Carlos Sainz has those links to Audi through his dad and through the relationship that he's built up over there. You would imagine that that would be Carlos Sainz's preference of places of where to go if he is going to leave Williams. And that is a big if. As far as we're aware, in terms of his contract, he has a contract until 2026 with additional options to stay for 2027. So it looks like no matter what, Carlos Sainz will be on the grid in 2027. Just what colour he will be in, we're still waiting to find out. If he stays at Williams though, he is committing to this project, and I think it will keep him here longer than just 1 year, at which point he would be 33, 34 midway through the 2028 season. And if Williams still aren't hitting the front, then I think there's some big questions to ask of Carlos Sainz, and I think it makes it very difficult then to leave and find yourself a better team when you've been rolling around at the back for 2 years. As I've said earlier on, our very own Thomas Marr has said multiple times that Fernando Alonso and Max Verstappen hold the key to this silly season. Whether Fernando Alonso retires or moves elsewhere, Max Verstappen, if he ends up at McLaren or whoever, or leaves the sport, that will shape the way that the 2027 grid looks. If no one changes, then for the likes of Carlos Sainz, you're stuck there for another year, even if you want to leave. So if I was Carlos Sainz, what would I do? I think my top choice is Aston Martin. I think you play it out for the rest of the season, see how Aston Martin keep progressing. The progress that they made in Hungary to catapult Fernando Alonso up the qualifying timesheet shows that if they can get it right, they will get it right and they will progress. There looks like there's bigger potential for Aston Martin to go further, and I think that's what you're looking at, is how much potential but how much risk. Is Carlos Sainz at the age of 32 in September in a position to risk everything? Potentially. But the big thing is, Adrian Newey is such a huge pulling factor towards Aston Martin. I wouldn't make any snap decisions unless you're worried Fernando Alonso is going to keep you out of that seat for another year, because if Fernando Alonso gets even within a sniff of the fact that he could win a championship in 2027 or 2028, I can't see him retiring. And I also think as well, with that Aston Martin seat, he would be the favourite to go into the Aston Martin seat. Of course, Sergio Perez would put his name into the hat and be like, look, I'm here, I want to be back towards the front of the grid. But I think Carlos Sainz would be the favourite. I think he would be the most likely candidate and potentially the most successful candidate to take on Aston Martin. Although we know there are links to other teams and there are options, at the moment there aren't many options. Fernando and Max haven't made any decisions, and so there's no seats to have. At the moment, he's a Williams driver, and it's looking increasingly likely that he will be a Williams driver for 2027. Let me know in the comments section below, where do you think Carlos Sainz will go next year? Obviously, a lot of this is my opinion, so don't take what I'm saying as absolute scripture, but if, he does end up one of those 3 teams, do come back here and be like, Sam, you're a genius, because I've told you he was going there. Let me know in the comments then where you would go if you were Carlos Sainz, and make sure as well that you like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Cheers!